let's put it in context of the menopausal brain, because I'm mildly fascinated with the menopausal brain, not just because I have one, but because I watch so many women suffer through this. Yes. And so here's the way that my understanding of this is right now. The amygdala and the prefrontal cortex are often working, I would call it, against each other. I am sure you have a reframe for me on that one. But this is the way I would say it, is like the amygdala wants to keep me safe. And so the amygdala is constantly scanning my environment for safety. And when something comes into my environment that I don't feel safe with, it highlights that and makes it a priority.
It's your alarm system.
It's my alarm system. Okay. So the prefrontal cortex is the part of the brain that's like, hey, we should do this, this, and this. There's so many, I call it the place of hope and possibility. Like, hey, we could go do this, or I could be that, I could do that. Like, life is very possible. But the two always feel like they're working, like the amygdala is like, the parent that's like, hey, chill out. It's not that great. And the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex is like the part of the brain that's like, no, it could be great. It could be really, really good. And like the two of them are constantly going at each other. And from a hormonal standpoint, there are estrogen and progesterone receptors in both parts of the brain. And actually the amygdala has more receptors for GABA, which progesterone is a precursor for GABA. And I think that's to calm the brain down. But then once we go into menopause, we don't have access to GABA. Do you see where I'm going with this? And the amygdala wins. And then we end up walking around looking at everything that we need to control. Everything could potentially go wrong. We are, mothering teenage children, which will get your amygdala flying. There's so many things that allow that whole limbic system just to come to the surface.
Yeah.
So my question to you is, A, am I right? Like, is that how it works? And then B, like, what can you do to integrate those two parts of the brain? Because it's like a battle sometimes in my brain between for real estate of, am I going to choose hope and possibility, or am I going to be fearful of this moment and really think through and not go into action for fear that the amygdala is right and something bad could happen to me?
This is such a good question. So what I'll say is that when we have gotten disturbing curriculum, we can call it traumatic, right? That's disturbing to us now. We have basically had our alarm system customized, probably not by choice, right?
Yeah,
so we have a customized alarm system that's going to try to help us stay safe from whatever that thing or things were going forward, right? I think what's so confusing, especially for women, is that when our hormones are changing, right, our alarm system is going off, but there might not be a trauma history. There might not be old curriculum that needs to be modified and to be curious about. And so I think what's so important that, and why I'm such a champion of what you're doing, is that you are giving women a narrative about what's happening with their bodies now that they can incorporate in real time to understand, right? I might be feeling like my alarm system's going off at 2:00 in the morning as I'm sweating. And I know I'm safe because I have a way to understand my body sensations.
Okay, so let's talk about that second thing. What gives you the safety then? Is that like at 2 a.m, you're sweating, you're ruminating, you don't feel safe? Is that then understanding, okay, well, like let's give some people some, if you don't have an EMDR specialist near you, could you start doing the shoulder tapping? And could you ask yourself like, okay, it's clear I don't feel safe right now. I don't seem to have enough GABA. Well, that makes sense because I don't have enough progesterone to help me with GABA. So I don't have to believe this thought that I'm not safe. But it's 2 a.m. What the hell do I do with that thought?
So I think what you just created in real time is a resource for people. I mean, wouldn't it be amazing if they could listen to you, give them a calming narrative about what's happening with their body hormonally while they tapped it in real time to understand, I am safe. This is what's happening to my body. I understand myself. My body doesn't feel good right now when it's hot and my heart is racing and I have a cadence. It doesn't feel good. But if I can have the understanding that I am safe now and I can hear Mindy's voice tapping that in, right? Because I'm going through perimenopause or menopause, right? Then that takes away the intensity of the alarm system.
The tapping does, and the naming it, the acknowledging
the narrative. I mean, think about how many people, I mean, I'll just say this. I mean, just, the ladies on my street, we all get together, once a month. And it's like, I've heard them tell me me so many times that I've lost joy in what I'm doing. I'm having hot flashes. I'm anxious all the time. And they, talk to me as kind of the neighborhood therapist, like, do I have trauma? Like, what the hell is going on with me? And sometimes that's the case, and sometimes it's not. And just them being able to understand what's happening to their own body, because no one taught them that. Like, growing up, they didn't get a curriculum around this is what's going to happen to you, later in life. So it feels like a shock. It does feel traumatizing because there's no framework to put it into.
Yeah. So just by labeling it, naming it, understanding it, the healing has already happened in that moment. Yeah.
Yes.
And that's what's not happening for menopausal women right now, because we're being shamed, we're being medicated. You and I've talked about this, like the debate is around HRT, BHRT, no, yes. Like there's so much to think about just to navigate your hormones dropping. It's gotten ridiculous now. And so, but what I have experienced, and I call it the neurochemical armor, that when we're younger, because all these receptor sites are being stimulated by these hormones, we actually have more neurochemical resources to handle the traumas, or maybe even to hide the traumas. And so, but once that goes away, and you run this past the ladies on the street, once that goes away, the next month, it's like you're standing on the street totally naked.
Yes.
And you're like, I'm not well. Something's not well. And that, if you're listening to this and that's you, again, please know I'm highlighting this. I'm writing about this. I'm educating people on this because I am you. It is part of the menopausal experience that is not being highlighted enough.
And as a trauma therapist, I thank you for that, because what is traumatizing to anybody is that they're having a very real experience and no one is reflecting back to them what's happening to them, right?
Yep.
And so I think that, and I've seen this too with women, like I'm having this experience in my body and in my emotions, but I'm gaslighting myself that I'm not, or that I should be who I was or how I felt before this. Like just the gaslighting around this is really toxic for people. And I do think that is toxic. That is abusive, I think. So I think for you to be able to clearly name for people what's happening to their bodies, right, is creating an experience for them where they can experience their own body in their natural state, as we age, where it doesn't have to be so traumatic, right? We don't have to gaslight ourselves. We don't have to be shocked this is happening or confused about why it's happening. We can talk about it.
And then we have a healthcare system that has this patriarchal approach to it. And so we give our power away to it when we step in there. And then we are gaslighted once again in there.